forces behind our visible government are very old and very deep. Much deeper than Trump, much deeper than Washington. George Washington was very much a part of the hidden hand of history. But he wasn't the consummate insider. There was a moment in history that he needed to be schooled. We don't learn about this moment in history classes or on the television. But it sheds light on the events that occur today. General Cornwallis, Lord Cornwallis, from the tip of the top of the social stratum, educated at Eton, Cambridge, served at the highest levels of the British military. But of special note, he worked for the British East Indian Trading Company, who are really in the business of setting up corporations. And he worked for them in the capacity of setting up the Corporation of India, the Corporation of Ireland, and the Corporation of the United States. And that's what we call nations, these corporations, mostly derived by the British East Indian Company. So if we were to get inside of his head, Lord Cornwallis, at that moment he's surrendering to this ragtag army, he might be thinking to himself, my brother happens to be the admiral of the biggest navy that's ever existed in human history. Kind of funny thinking about this, since you have no navy at all. He might be thinking, I wonder if my brother decided to unleash even a part of this navy, what kind of havoc it might wreak upon the ports and the cities of Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Baltimore. Wreck the economy within a week, devastate the cities and the infrastructures and the economy of the entire nation. And that's what was going on here. According to the official secretary of this meeting, Cornwallis is about to tell George Washington about a program, very old program, goes deeper than an economic or a nation-creating program. It's a spiritual program. He calls it a holy war that's began. And the forces that are waging this war are the forces behind the crown, forces behind Jewry, assuming he's meaning Talmudic, Kabbalistic Jewry, and Freemason and Freemasonry. Person could think maybe he didn't say it, maybe the secretary didn't record it right, maybe I shouldn't be presenting the information. But I think a lot of the events that are unfolding today make a lot of sense when you think about what Lord Cornwallis was revealing to Washington in that moment in 1781. Again, we see that when we want to get outside the cave walls, nothing is really as it appears. This corporation that he's creating has a long-term plan for shaping the perceptions of the subjects therein. And this is where we get this idea that the Roman Empire, the British Empire, and the project embedded deep within it is still very much alive. And you might say, well, that's an opinion. But I challenge anybody to actually look over the case made by James Montgomery. It's available on PDF. I think 1 in 1,000, maybe if you got this far, 1 in 100 people would actually go and read it. Contractual basis of this relationship, at the actual conditions of permanent, perpetual reparations to be paid by U.S. citizens, which are still being paid to this day to the Crown, the powers therein. So sometimes it's important to stop, think about that projection on the side of the cave wall. Just ask yourself, who's holding the camera?
Study of the signed treaties and charters between Britain and the United States exposes a shocking truth. The United States has always been, and still is, a British Crown colony. King James I was famous not for just changing the Bible into the King James Version, but for signing the First Charter of Virginia in 1606. That charter granted America's British forefathers a license to settle and colonize America. The charter also guaranteed that future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all the citizens and colonized land in America stolen from the Indians. After America declared its independence from Great Britain, the Treaty of 1783 was signed. That treaty specifically identified the King of England as the Prince of the United States and contradicts the belief that America won the War of Independence. Although King George III of England gave up most of his claims over his American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. With the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment is called the Title of Nobility Amendment and forbids U.S. presidents and their officials from using royal titles like king or prince or baron. For some mysterious reason, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears on current copies of the Constitution. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the king. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings and destroyed ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. 1 century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters. Most Americans still believe that the Fed, or Federal Reserve, is the government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Kuhn and Loeb, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Israel Seif, and the Lehman Brothers. This private banking cartel is the Fed and is never audited and never pays taxes. They print and design America's money, which displays their symbols of an Egyptian pyramid, a Masonic all-seeing eye, and the words, "In God we trust." Who exactly is the God they trust? They also collect American taxpayers' money through the IRS. Then they loan it back again with interest to pay for roads, bridges, and other public works. American presidents are handpicked and financed by these special interest power groups. Like George W. Bush, John Forbes Kerry, whose initials are JFK, is a member of Yale University's Skull and Bones Brotherhood. The Forbes part of John Kerry's name identifies his descendancy from Captain Robert Bennett Forbes, who was a drug runner for the Rothschilds' opium drug trade with China in the 1800s. Most U.S. citizens believe that the United States is a country and that the president is the most powerful man on earth. The United States is not a country. It is a corporation, and the president is president of the corporation of the United States. He and his elected officials work for the corporation, not for the American people. Since the United States is a corporation, who owns the corporation of the United States? Like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers and kings, and whose land is called Crown land,